Hi everyone, welcome to the Advocacy Media. You're watching the Journey Series video podcast. My name is Mark. I'm a brown man who's bald with a black and white beard. I've got a brown and black shirt on today.
And I'm Crystal. Today I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt, and I have brown hair, and brown glasses, and that's it. I'm in home office.
Today we're speaking with Anna McILwain, who's a health coach and registered nurse. Hi Anna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna, and I have green eyes, brown hair with lots of silver streaks. I have plastic glasses. Well, they're not plastic, but a plastic frame that is green. I have a gray blouse with ruffle in the front, and it's got splashes of let me see, turquoise and hot pink and brown, little flowers and little twigs. It makes me happy. That's why I wore it. It's like a painting.
So do you just want to get started then?
Sure. So I was asked to share a little bit about my story, and I became disabled in the fact that I developed asthma, sudden onset as an adult. Um, But I'm going to go back even further. Although it's not classed as a disability, I do have an autoimmune disease, but that was created a lot of daily pain. I had it since I was a child. And the reason why I'm sharing that is because that's part of my mindset that helped me become strong and deal with challenges. My parents didn't really like to use doctors unless you were like bleeding or couldn't get a fever under control. We were in Canada, so it was socialized medicine, but it was just mom would kind of fix us up. And unless you were like really, really sick, you didn't go to a doctor. So because it was sort of invisible and nobody could see my pain, it was kind of just pushed away. So I realized as a kid, oh, maybe this is normal to feel pain all the time and to have times where it was hard to walk, where there was pain in my back or in my knees or whatever. So I grew up just kind of ignoring that and learning to do what I wanted to do in spite of the pain and using my mind to block that out. So that was part of what I learned as a child was to that my mind was a powerful thing. And then when I was like nursing, I was going to say I was 40 years old because it was in 2006. And I remember it because I was walking out of a patient's room. At that time, I was a telemetry nurse. That's for people that we deal with people with heart issues that have like had a bypass or preparing for a bypass or have unstable angina. Sometimes they've had strokes. So they're very acute. They're quite sick. They're on monitoring. And I had a heavy patient load because I was considered a senior nurse. So I had 6 patients. So there's, if you know a nurse, it's a very challenging profession. It's very physical. It's very challenging mentally because you're dealing with very sick, very highly acute patients. So I was walking out of the room between one patient and the other, and a lady walked by me, and I don't know, like it was almost instant. Within a minute or so, I started just feeling like I couldn't breathe. I just, I started gasping, and it had never happened before. I didn't know what was going on. I mean, even with my nursing background, I didn't recognize what was going on. Um, I started feeling dizzy. I got wheezy, and it got worse and worse. And it was a quiet day. It was the afternoon, so nobody was in the hall because it was at the other end of the hall. And by this time, I'm grabbing the wall, and I'm like, I was just gasping for air, and I didn't know what was going on. I'd never had an asthma attack in my life. And I was starting to almost see spots, and I thought, what is going on? Am I dying? Like, it just was that severe. And I was really blessed that a friend who was a respiratory tech happened to walk by and saw me, and he grabbed my arm, literally saw what was going on, dragged me into a room, the first room that was available with oxygen, put it on high, stuffed the mask on my face, took my pulse ox, and I was vaguely aware what he was doing. He pulled something out of his pocket and he pulled down the oxygen mask and put it in my mouth and says, seal that with your lips, breathe in. And I did that, and then he put the oxygen back on, and then he's kind of muttering. And when you're not getting enough oxygen, it's difficult to think clearly. So I was having a hard time thinking clearly. I didn't know what he was doing or why he was doing it. Because my nursing training and background was on hold because my brain was suffering. So then eventually I noticed it became easier to breathe. And then he said, when I finally got better, he checked my oxygen with a pulse oximeter and it was back to 98%. And he said, oh my gosh, Anna, your pulse ox was 78%. Now, just FYI for your people, normally we need around 90s or so for pulse ox. And some people will get if they've got a lung disease, maybe they'll get in the 80s, but if you get in the 70s, your organs are not getting sufficient oxygen. You're going to have what we call hypoxia. You're not going to get enough oxygen to your organs. And my brain was not getting enough. My lungs was not getting enough. So he said, where's your rescue inhaler? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, where's your rescue inhaler? I didn't know you had asthma. That was a terrible asthma attack. And I was having a hard time talking. My voice was really raspy. And I just looked at him and I said, I don't have asthma. And I was like really raspy. And that happens sometimes with asthmatics. And then he said to me, well, something to the effect of, if you don't have asthma, I'm not a respiratory tech, because that was classic. And I was like, what? And the disability, as far as the asthma, I went from breathing normally and never having an asthma attack to having several. And I don't remember, that was, 18 years ago. I don't remember if he gave me a rescue inhaler or if he sent me to the doctor and I got one right away because I had a reported asthma attack. I don't remember, because I do know it took a while to get into a specialist. But within 2 weeks, I do remember I was having multiple asthma attacks a day. And I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what was triggering it. I went to a lung specialist and got tested and found out, yes, I did have asthma. I'd always had allergies. And I'd always been sensitive to perfumes and colognes and scented things. But like it would give me headaches. But I didn't know what my trigger was for quite a while. Like I would be standing in, I remember Walmart checkout lines. I don't know why Walmart was the worst. Maybe because people were standing closer and there was a lot of line. And I would be pulling at my shirt sometimes and saying, is it hard to breathe? It's hard to breathe. There's no air. And the cashier would be looking at me and she'd say, ma'am, you're turning blue. Are you okay? And I would say, mm-mm. And I learned that I had to like leave my groceries and run out to the car, get my inhaler, get in a place where the air was clean or safe for me. So I realized it took me probably 3 months to realize that any kind of perfumes, colognes, scented anything would send me into an immediate asthma attack. Like my upper airways would shrink and I would get wheezy. And when you have an asthma attack, it's hard to breathe in, but it's also really hard to breathe out. So you feel like you can't get any air in, and then the air that's in there is trapped. And you just feel like Your lungs are on fire and you're also drowning in the wrong kind of air is the best way I can describe it. So it's very, oh gosh, I'm not gonna, don't know why I'm getting emotional. It was very frightening, because it was just powerless. You need to breathe.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I came to realize that, this is not a safe place for me. I had to quit my job because everywhere I went, there was perfume, colognes. There was no safe place. And I became very paranoid where I felt like, oh no, there's no place where I can breathe. There's no safety for me anywhere. And so I became very depressed. I became disabled in the fact that I was losing lung function. I wasn't exercising because there was no place to exercise that was safe. And when I did exercise, my asthma was triggering. So I went on this downward spiral course of asthma. And the more you have um, asthma attacks or inflammation in your body, the more inflammation you get. So it was like a perfect snowball spiraling down. And within a short time, I was on so much medication. I was on all kinds of steroids, and I was getting worse and worse. And I think it was about a year into it or so. And I remember I went for a lung function test. I was with my specialist, and he came back, and that was when I had my big epiphany that kind of changed my life for getting me into health coaching. And he said to me, "You're a very sick lady. Your lung function is 19%." And I kind of gasped. I was really surprised at that. I knew that I was having a hard time by that time speaking on the phone. I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without breathing heavy. And I said, "That's bad, isn't it?" And he said, "Yeah, that's terrible. We have to." And I'm just saying it was 19% in the in the lower airways. I think it was like 30% in the upper airways. But still, your lower airways is where the alveoli are, is where the oxygen does where it bypasses past the membrane. And so that's where it's important that you have good lung function. And so when I said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" Because I was in the mindset that the doctor had to fix me. And he said, "Well, asthma is not curable. There's nothing we can do. You're on all the medications we can give you. Um, we can maybe give you more steroids, but um, there's not much else we can do." And I had at that moment this visual of, I'm 40 years old, and I had this visual of bent over as if I'm 90 years old. No, nothing to anyone that's 90, but that's kind of what I thought. I had this vision of me bent over, gasping for air, hauling an oxygen tank like as if I was 90. And I'm 40. I have 4 kids and all these responsibilities. And when I saw that kind of image in my mind, every cell in my body rebelled and said, "No, I don't accept that. That's not who I am." And I remember that was my huge epiphany when I said, "Oh, no, that's not who I am. I don't accept that." And I realized if I'm going to get better, it's going to be up to me. And so I went home and I'm a very spiritual person. I started praying and thinking, trying to combine my nursing knowledge, thinking about, lungs and how they work. They're a smooth muscle and you have to stress muscle to make it strong. And as I prayed and thought, I really do believe that God reminded me this. At one point, I was into voice training and I actually was interested in becoming an opera singer. So I have music in my background as well, piano and voice. And I had been studying this Gretchen am Spinnrad, which is a German leader. And there's this one stanza in it where you had to hold one breath and sing a whole lot of notes very hard up and down this run. And I remember saying to my vocal coach, I can't do it. And she said, you have to do it. If you're going to sing this in competition, there's no break marks for you to breathe. You have one breath. You must get through this entire stanza on one breath, and you must do it well, or don't bother singing the song. So I remembered that as I had prayed and thought, I remembered her telling me about these divers that could dive for 7 to 10 minutes without oxygen. And she said, don't tell me you can't sing for a minute or two on one breath. If divers can dive, you can sing. So she gave me these vocal exercises to do, and it took many months and hard work. And eventually I did. I sang it. I did great. I did it in competition. I did fabulous. I was able to do it. When she first tested me, I could only do half of the stanza, and I doubled my capacity with that. So part of my epiphany and maybe answer to prayer was, oh, you have tools. You can do exercises. You know how to increase your lung capacity. You can start doing those breath exercises again. That will increase your lung capacity. It worked once before. And then I also realized that I was doing everything wrong. And I'm a habits coach as a coach. That's my expertise. I mean, I had every bad habit because I was depressed. I was staying up half the night watching movies. I was drinking soda. I was binging chocolate. I had every bad habit. I was feeling bad about myself. I was feeling hopeless and helpless. I wasn't exercising because my mind was saying, can't, can't, can't. And then when I started realizing I can and I will and I must, then my mind opened and I was able to start thinking of things. I went back to my doctor and I said, look, I need to exercise again, but I have two barriers. One of them is I need a place that is safe to exercise where there's not fragrance. And then the other barrier is I start exercising and 3 or 4 minutes in, I have an asthma attack. So how can I exercise? And my doctor was fabulous. He was East Indian, so he had more of maybe an open mindset. Not that I'm saying Western medicine doesn't, but he kind of looked beyond things and he said, well, you could take your rescue inhaler up to this many times, and that would be equal to a treatment. But before you even try doing anything cardio, try taking one puff of your rescue inhaler, and it might prevent the exercise-induced asthma. So I won't say the number because it depends on the person and the doctor, and not every doctor would be comfortable with that. But I did the first time. So I came up with this plan. I came up with the very first thing I envisioned what I was going to be, and I do this with my clients. And if you want to change, you got to believe you can change. That was the first thing, right? I realized this is not who I am. This is who I am, and I envisioned this person standing healthy and strong in a victory with my arms out like that, and I envisioned that. I saw it, and breathing easily, and I had put on a lot of weight because of the steroids. I saw myself as being fit and maybe walking and biking again and breathing easily. And I just pictured that so clear in my mind. So much so that that's actually the pose on my Facebook profile picture for anyone that's interested. That's my picture. I'm really proud of it because I did that. But so I came up with this plan of eating healthy foods, getting sleep. I stopped soda. I cut my sugar way down. I overcame binge eating, which is something I have been struggling with. I overcame all of these bad habits. And the biggest thing was I just decided I'm going to keep doing this because the alternative is death and leaving my children. And that's not an acceptable alternative. So I'm going to do this and not give up. and I'm going to keep at it until I get my victory. And that's probably why I named my company Health Goal Victories, because again, that's touching to my heart. So I remember the very first time I went to the elliptical machine, I looked all over for gyms, and they all had these air fresheners. And I was like, that's not going to work. I can't breathe. I found a gym that they agreed to remove the automatic air fresheners, and they had a 24-hour time that I could use my key to come. So I found a time when almost nobody was there, and I was able to go at a time that was safe for me. And the very first time I went, I remember I said, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do 7 or 10 minutes on the elliptical. And within 7 minutes, I had taken all of the rescue inhaler I was allowed in an hour. So I said, okay, I'm not getting my 10 minutes in, but I did 7 minutes. And I was proud of myself because that was 7 more minutes than I had been doing. And right, so then the next day I said, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to keep going for 10 minutes. And eventually, long story short, I did my 10 minutes, then my 20 and my 30. I think I was up to 20 minutes in about 3 months, which was incredible. Um, and then I was able to do 45. And what was so incredible is by just keeping at it, not giving up. Obviously, there was challenges. I got sick once in a while. Sometimes people would come in wearing a lot of cologne or perfume, and I'd have to leave. But I just didn't give up, and I eventually got as better as I can get. Like, I still have asthma, but at that point, it was considered severe and uncontrolled. It's now considered controlled and mild. I'm no longer on steroids. I'm supposed to take my steroid inhaler a couple times a day. I take it maybe once every month or two. Every once in a while, I'll start feeling like I'm getting a bit of inflammation. I'll take it. But for the most part, I'm in incredible control. And I really believe it was my lifestyle habit overhaul, which is
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and that's what I do as a coach, right? I mean, and the amazing thing is by the end of that year, I went from 19% lung function to 100% lung function.
Wow.
I mean, I just want to shout and scream and whoop for joy because I went from a very poor prognosis to quote unquote normal. I still have like an invisible disability. I eventually got to 110% lung function. So
Mm.
I eventually got to where my lungs were better than they were pre-asthma. So I was astonished that I could do that. Of course, because I had to change how I was eating, I changed my sleeping. I lost the steroid weight. I got back into a size that was really healthy and good for me. I started eating foods that supported my goals. The good thing is, I didn't do it all at once and I just never gave up. And, healing wasn't immediate. It took a lot of maybe discipline and just doggedness because I'm like
Yeah.
stubborn. So yeah, that was my story. And the other interesting thing is when I did that, I also like used the similar method to get my autoimmune disease into remission. And I take minimal doses for my asthma, minimal medicine. And I take I'm at a third of the dose that I'm recommended to be on for my autoimmune disease. It's in incredible control. And I'm working on stepping back until I'm hoping someday to be drug free. Now, I'm not supporting people to go off their medication without doctor approval. And so, but what I am saying is I think the issue with our sick care system is that there's a couple of problems with it. And one of them is that I believe that the mindset can cause people to feel like victims, and that can happen with disabilities. It can cause us to feel like I am this way, and there's nothing I can do about it. And as long as I was stuck in that mindset of this is who I am, I couldn't get better. I was getting more and more sick. And when I removed that label, instead of saying I am asthmatic, I now tell people I have asthma.
Right.
Do you see the difference? It doesn't embody all of me. And so, yeah, it really completely changed who I was and my health. And I'm so passionate about it because I was able to get better. And so that's what I teach. I teach people that. I help clients with that. I help them adopt healthy habits because the shocking thing is 60% of American adults have chronic illness, and 40%, and I'm sure that includes many in our disability community, have two or more chronic illnesses. And about 74% of American adults are considered overweight, and 43% are considered obese. So the problem with our habits today in our Western community is they're causing us to be overweight and sick. And we get in this mentality of, I can't do anything about it. And that's where
Right.
I come in. That's
Right.
where I come in. I don't agree with that. I don't buy that.
Right. No, it's frustrating because you have these companies that it's very obvious they're presenting foods and snacks and processed stuff that's contributing to um, what disability already is, or anybody that has something, right? And those are just exacerbating the problem, and they're passing it off as, it's unhealthy, but it's not gonna harm you. We know different now that a lot of those things are, can be poisonous to someone who already has health issues.
Yeah. And I'm gonna play a bit of a devil's advocate here. They they're they obviously have these things that aren't gonna make us healthy, but they do just enough to fly under the radar, right?
Mhm.
And they'll say stuff like, "Oh, people shouldn't eat like bags and bags of this stuff," but yet they lace it with ingredients that are designed to make it you want more, right?
Yeah.
And play off of that, people who have the inability or to regulate certain emotions, or maybe have a tendency to get addicted to things, they're capitalizing on those sort of things.
Oh,
No?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that in the quote unquote, I do quote unquote food industry because I can't call that food. We know that scientists have been hired to put they're called additives. In other words, they're not natural for food, but they put addictive substances into the food to create people, to cause them to eat more, and even worse, to cause their natural satisfying satiation
Right.
mechanisms to turn off so that you eat more and more. And then, of course, it's laced with some of your processed food, it's laced with trans fatty acid, so much fat and sugar and salt that it lights up our reward center in our brain, the dopamine center, and so that it makes us get that reward. And that's so many of our negative habits, our bad habits, are because it lights up that dopamine reward, and so then it becomes more addictive. And then whatever substance we're using, because I work with people that are smoking, I work with people that are overeaters, emotional eaters, bingers, those habits, the food, whether it's junk food or smoking or whatever they're using, the substance to calm those negative emotions, to heal those emotional triggers, it doesn't work. And so it doesn't remove the stress. So then they end up using more of it, and it creates this vicious cycle, very much like I was getting more and more medicine, and it wasn't making me better. It wasn't healing me, because I was only relying on that. And, our bodies need nutritious food and exercise and sleep, and we need to manage our stress. And that's why our lifestyle habits are so imperative for whether we have health or whether we don't. And I really think that part of the issue is that people get told can't and no all the time, right? I was reading a bit of a book called gosh, it just left my head, The Fearless Mind, by Dr. Craig Manning. And he's like a behavioral psychologist, and he works with professional athletes, and he works with mindset. And for me, I work with, like, when you're looking at behavior, you've got to look at mindset, like what you're thinking and what you're believing, then your habits, and then also your environment. Like, when I work with people, we look at all three. What are you thinking and believing? What are your habits? And what is the environment? Is it supporting your habits? But for him, he said the biggest thing is your mindset is already geared for negative, because from the time a child is a baby before they're 18, they've already heard 148,000 no's. So we know our minds have an incredible ability. They have, I was looking this up the other day, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but this shocked me that our brains can process something around 100 billion neurotransmissions per second. Now, that's not what we're conscious of, but we're only conscious of like 5% of our brain. 95% of it, we're unconscious of what's going on in the background, but that's a phenomenal amount of information. And so that 5% of our consciousness controls, so much of what's going on subconsciously. So it's so important what we believe and what we tell ourselves. I was listening to your other podcast the other day. I think his name was Brayson. Is it Brayson Lee? That had a neurological disability. And he was talking about how words matter, and how, like, negative images and negative words can really have an impact on whether you believe you can change and whether you believe you can't. Because I'm all about helping people make healthy changes.
And speaking of that, that's a good segue, because I noticed a particular word you used before when you were speaking. You chose to call it sick care instead of what most people call it health care, right? Because it's true that it's just this system that propagates itself, and everyone in the chain benefits from us being sick. As long as we say sick, the machine keeps going, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's hard to call it healthcare, knowing that. And it's a very, like, all these things, any manner of um addiction, right? I've I've read a bit about it, and I have my own struggles with stuff sometimes, but I understand. I've come to understand, thanks to Crystal and some of the things we've watched together and all that, that our habits, or our negative habits or addictions, they're they're on the surface, and our disabilities or like our symptoms, and we're going to the doctor to get those treated, and they're only looking at the symptoms and they're not looking at the underlying causes, which is why am I grabbing or a bag of chips and just mowing through it, or doing whatever drugs or I'm doing or whatever. It's not because, well, I'm sure on some level obviously you're addicted, but it's because you're trying to cope with something, some deep psychological pain that you've
Exactly.
had to maybe mask, and you don't know how to. You're like, I've got this geyser over here. All I can do is grab a band-aid because that's all I know what to do, right?
Yeah, what a beautiful visual. And that is so true because what I've noticed in working with people that have unhealthy habits that have taken them to some of my clients need to lose 50 plus pounds or and have had multiple heart attacks or have COPD after decades of smoking. And they are at the point where I was, where you have to change or you're going to die early. Those are the kind of people that usually come to me. And what I have noticed is with every single person I've ever interviewed, it's not it's not so much the illness, like you said, with our sick care system, and I hope no one in the healthcare gets upset with me because I do understand there's lots of good, the doctors and surgeons, there's lots of good they do. There are some medicines we have to have, but all the problem is the focus is on take a pill, get a procedure, and so often when people are coping, they are coping in ways that are not healthy, that are causing the disease in the first place. And that's what lifestyle medicine is about. The majority of the chronic illnesses in America are from our lifestyle habits. So we're not victims. If we change our habits, we can change our lifestyle. But I have not yet interviewed a single person that had some kind of a negative habit, whether it was smoking or an addiction or whatever it was, that have, maybe life threatening illnesses that they have to change. It doesn't have, I call it emotional triggers. And there's all of these models for habits. And the one thing that they seem to be missing that you just said so eloquently, and I also discovered was these are emotional coping mechanisms. There's emotional triggers. And lots of times those are deep seated. They go sometimes way back into childhood. When I interview people, I'll ask, wait a minute, before you grabbed that bag of chips, what you used, what were you feeling? And what were you thinking? And because what happens when we have a habit? We make a decision. At some point in your life, the person that used the bag of chips, let's say that they had trauma in their childhood and they felt bad about themselves. And then every time something happens, maybe their boss gave them a bad review or they had an argument with their significant others, those feelings resurfaced. And so the brain, at one point, they grabbed a bag of chips. They had that dopamine rush where they had that quick high where they felt better. And the brain said, okay, I can let this go. This made me feel better for a little while. And so then they had that feedback loop, which is what a habit is. It told the brain tells it, okay, when I feel bad, I grab the chips, I get this dopamine reward, I feel better. And so every time they feel that emotion then, or they have that thing happen that builds those feelings, it triggers those early emotions and they grab the chips. And after a while, they're grabbing the chips and having no idea where it is. And that's why, I mean, the problem with a lot of programs, and I don't have a program, I work with people, although I do have steps I use in sort of a program, but it's very custom for each person because everybody has different issues. The issue is you've got to get to the root, right? What's driving the behavior? What was driving my binge eating and my binging of movies and drinking sodas and staying up all night and taking my asthma from being moderate to being life threatening was my lifestyle habits. I didn't know it, but that's what it was.
And going back to the products that were given to us as far as process and stuff like that, and like those addictive things that we do to try to quickly solve it, that dopamine hit you're talking about, cigarettes, whatever it be, So uh, companies know this,
Yep,
and it's a psychological manipulation and gaslighting thing because they say, oh, well, let's fix this. And the doctors come in. There's definitely medicines that are very effective and help different situations.
sure.
But for the most part, doctors say, oh, well, we have a solution for that. So they can go in and say, that, well, let's solve our problem to fix the problem,
And it
Yeah, and go
go.
ahead, Mark.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, and it goes even deeper than that. It's part of
Oh, yeah.
keeping the whole mechanism running.
Yeah.
There are a certain a segment of people that are traumatized and are going around and traumatizing other people. And all these people have to reach for coping mechanisms, and they can only grab what they can grab depending on economic circumstances and a whole host of other things. So,
Right.
and the way the financial system is built, it rewards bosses. It rewards bosses who are tyrants, and they go around and they berate and humiliate the employees. So then those employees have to reach for their coping mechanism. This is a whole big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even our culture is very competitive. You know, one of the things that I do when I work with people is I tell them don't compete with anybody else. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. You have your own, and maybe this segues into a good way of how to break some of those coping mechanisms is first of all becoming aware that that's happening
Yeah.
because we can't break what we're not aware of. Um, we have to become aware and then we have to realize that we can choose something else. So I can tell on myself. I told you that I was at one point binging chocolate. I realized that coping mechanism was actually modeled for me when I was very young by a caretaker. And then when I realized when I had a similar thing happen in my life, I saw, okay, that's a good way. I can read and I can eat chocolate, and it's a way to escape when I'm not feeling good. And so that became a coping mechanism. I remember I call myself, I was a closet binger at one point, which is, some people that come to me. Nobody knew. My husband, I only told him this year, do you know that I used to be a binger? I used to be a closet binger. And he said, what? We've been married 38 years. So I was able to break that cycle along with all that when I was working with my plan. And I started becoming aware of what's going on in my body. And I realized that when I had a conflicted relationship with somebody close to me, one of my siblings, and when they would call, I would sometimes feel a little bit anxious. And it's great. We were able to eventually heal it, and we have a great relationship now. But at one point, there was some conflict. There is in all of our relationships, right? And I was on the phone, and the first time I recognized that I was using chocolate to binge as a coping mechanism for emotional stress, I remembered I'd gone literally into my closet because the kids were noisy, and I was on the phone, and we still had not patched up our relationship. And when I was finished our conversation, there was an entire bag of chocolate wrappers all over the floor, and I felt sick to my stomach, and I felt sick of myself. The other problem is sometimes with unhealthy habits, there's also shame and blame, and you feel guilty. And these things are addictive. So when I realized that, I said, well, that is not good. I don't want to use this as a coping mechanism. I first became aware, and then I secondly, and I do this with others, I didn't judge myself. I said, what can I do that will help me, that is going to be positive, that will be a healthy way instead of feeling stressed. And so I remember the next time this happened, I just decided I was going to start pacing a walk. And then after that, I would like go out and go for a walk. Anytime I talked to anyone on the phone that I had, where I was worried there might be conflict. And anytime I had an argument with my spouse or my kids came home and they yelled at me, I went for a walk. And so it became a healthy coping mechanism. I haven't binged a bag of chocolates like that in over a decade, maybe 2 decades now. Now, occasionally I will still have chocolate, and I have to still be careful. I have methods in place now that I teach my people. I plate it, I count it up, and I also keep track of what I eat. I've been doing that for over a decade now because I used to binge. So there are ways to change your habits. And that goes into, if I can just say, part of the problem is we think we can't. When I went through nursing school in the 80s, I remember them telling us regarding addiction that once someone is addicted, there is a neural pathway that has been formed in the brain and there's no changing it. They'll be addicted the rest of their life. There's no fixing it. There's no changing it. This was in the mid 1980s. I'm aging myself. And I remember thinking, that's terrible. That can't be true because that means there's no hope. Because I've always been a hopeful, optimistic person, right out of my childhood when I had pain all the time. I wasn't diagnosed with my autoimmune disease till I was in my 20s. I didn't know it wasn't normal to have pain all the time. So I just said, that doesn't feel right to me. I didn't buy it. But now we know with neuroscience, and again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've done a lot of research into it. I'm so thrilled to report our brains can change. It's called neuroplasticity. Our brains can grow new neural pathways. And when we form new habits, the exciting thing is our brains can literally um, form a new pathway. Our brains are moldable. We don't understand how, but we now know that it's possible. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sorry, you were gonna say something, Chris.
I was talking with someone yesterday about see, I had a brain injury
Right.
24 years ago now. And the very first thing that was taught to me was that our pathways, our nerves in our brain will find new pathways and you'll do things differently, but they're gonna regenerate themselves, you know.
Fantastic.
And so it's so interesting how a lot of my, things have stayed in place. Like I can still internally, I'm still the same person, but I might do a few things different. It's the same thing. I mean, no matter what kind of damage is done, that same thing happens.
Yeah. Um, on one, I wanted to ask one question. So, a while back, Crystal and I watched we like this show on YouTube, Cinema Therapy, where they unpack movies from a psychological standpoint, right? And
Mm.
the host is a filmmaker, and he was talking about how he had to come to a point, like he grew up having this specific dream about being a certain kind of filmmaker, and had to And he came to a point where he realized, oh, well, I can't do that, and I need to deal with the grief of not being able to do that, and sort of adapt his dream and go in another direction. So what I'm wondering is when like obviously it's great to be positive and think you can change things, but what do you do with the patient or with yourself coming up against something which you can't change?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. Because besides, I mean, we also have to have realistic goals, right? We have to honor our limitations, and that's especially important in the disability community. I think um, I don't even look at it, and hopefully this isn't offensive to anyone. I don't look at it as limitations. I look at it as opportunities, opportunities to teach others, opportunities for growth. I just I know that we have limitations. I have limitations. I would love to go into a department store and take off my mask and just breathe. But I also know if I try to do that within about 2 minutes, I'm going to get a whiff of somebody's perfume, even though I no longer am um, severe with asthma. I still have that disability and that disease. And within 2 minutes, I'm going to start feeling my throat tighten, my airways tighten. I'm going to wheeze. And the scary thing is I will also lose my voice. So I also can't talk when I get asthma. So that's very scary and disabling. So I also believe we have to honor the the challenges and the limitations that we all have them, whether it's a disability or not. We all have like kind of, I don't even like to call boundaries, but there's things that we can do and there's things that we may have to do differently. Like what Crystal said, I love what she said that I can do things, but I might have to do them differently. You know, as someone in a wheelchair, they may say, I love to dance, but I'm going to dance differently.
I think I think sometimes, especially in the um non-disabled segment of the population, that is something that is not promoted,
Mm.
and to the extent that sometimes there's a lot of shame and judgment around that. If you're not doing it the way that we want you to do it, that you're wrong and you're bad, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's so disempowering and that's so against everything I believe in. Maybe partly why I became a health coach is because I'm such a believer and an advocate in empowering people and enabling them to honor their limitations and to own them and to say, I can do that, but this is the way that I will do that. And please honor my strengths. You have your strengths, I have my strengths. And really to go from a positive mentality instead of a lack of an abundance of we all have strengths and gifts, and one of the things I've noticed is that we cannot be successful in our work or in change in anything we do if we have a negative mindset, if we have an I can't or this is too hard. And what I've noticed in working with people is because I'm a change agent. That's what I do. I help people to change, to become healthy, and that takes discipline and certainly the right method and the right support. And there's no one way. And I work with people one on one with their gifts and their strengths, but they have to believe that they can change, and you have to honor that some person's way of quitting smoking will not work for somebody else. And um, it's really unfortunate that in our society, there is still sometimes stigmatism where people don't feel like they can be open, where there's still a lot of conformity. And, I work from home this way. This is how I help coach because I I cannot, because of my disability, for me to say, all right, the rest of the world needs to stop wearing perfume, cologne, scented laundry soap, scented deodorant, no more air fresheners. I mean, it's just unrealistic. It's not going to happen. So I live in a very protected bubble, but I still work and I still have um, knowledge to share. I'm still a helper. My dream as a nurse was to help people be well. And when that happened and I wasn't able to do that anymore, I went into health coaching. Or sorry, before that, I went into vocal and piano teaching and coaching. And I had a vocal and piano studio for about 17 years. It had to be fragrance free. There was a big list. And at one point I had a 2-year waiting list. I said, you could not wear this, this, and this. And if you have it, you're going home because I can't breathe. And that happened. And then COVID happened. And then I realized it wasn't safe for me to have people coming in my home. So that's when I said, I'm going to use my nursing and I'm going to use this thing that I have. And what got me started was someone close to me um, wanted me to help them. They were looking at possibly a surgery for weight loss and they were afraid of it. And I said, oh, no, please don't, because lots of people have the weight loss surgery and they gain it back. And I mean, that's a whole nother segue. Don't even have time for that. But, the whole magic shot. And we're talking about the drug industry and the cash cow that is and all the side effects. But anyways, this person didn't want to use that. They wanted to change their lifestyle. They tried all these diets. And I said, I can help you. I know I can help you if you're willing to help yourself. And so I worked with this person for 6 months. And in that 6 months, this person, I'm trying not to use gender, so I don't give anything away. They lost 45 pounds. And we're at 3 years later, and they have still maintained that weight loss because we didn't use a magic pill. We didn't use a drug. We changed the lifestyle habits. And before that, we started on the mindset of how this person felt about themselves, about the emotions, like what you said, Mark, and coping mechanisms that were food based and emotional eating, which I call eating your feelings. And in our Western community, we're not that great about that. I love the Eastern community way of dealing with negative emotions. In our society, we tend to ignore. Okay, I'm using a generalization, so you'll have to forgive me, but it seems like we tend to ignore negativity or suppress it. Yes, but in the Eastern community, they don't ignore or suppress. Part of their culture is mindfulness and awareness, is accepting what is. And so I got into meditation and mindfulness, and that's become part of my healing. And, just all of these things that can help us heal that we have in our bodies already. We have the ability to decide, I'm going to do something different. And we have the ability to deal with negative emotions in a healthy way. We have the ability to change our habits, but we just sometimes need support. You were going to say something, Crystal.
Yeah, yeah. You were talking earlier about the things that internally through meditation and other practices we do, um, we're able to hone into a place of understanding about purpose, ourselves. And so those statistics that you said, it would be interesting now that a lot more people are really diving into meditation and yoga and stuff like that, and they're expanding what they know and what they understand. It would be interesting to find out those statistics now and even in the future. you know, as we grow,
Yeah.
as more people understand it and are comfortable, with those things.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, I think the last survey I read, America's getting sicker. We spend more money per capita if we're talking about the healthcare system, but we're one of the most unhealthy communities in the world. And I think it's because there's a disconnect between what we're doing to our bodies and putting in our bodies and our health. And I think that part of that's just the mentality of give me a quick fix. Like we've got our cell phones, we want everything now. Give me a pill, fix it, give me a bag of chips, make me feel better. We're always wanting quick. I'm not saying that you can't have some quick things, but um, when you're working on changing habits, that takes time. It takes some self discipline. If you're working on building a habit of meditation, that's going to take some time, and it's going to take some time to see that. But absolutely, like for me to change, the very first thing that happened was an awareness. And I love what you just said, Crystal, about I wonder if becoming more aware as a global community, if that would improve our health, if we just start even becoming more aware of our emotions, and before we do that habit, whatever it is, what's going on, that curiosity can really help us, our minds lead us to, well, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Maybe I can do something different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Did you?
we we watched a documentary, I think it was um about the formation of the FDA, and we really understood how deeply embedded there's certain people and corporations have infiltrated that whole organization and the whole healthcare and food system and
Right.
twisted it into what they want by lobbying the government and other things like that. And you know, people, they part of their job is to foresee the things that could affect them negatively and infiltrate the people who make laws and make slight tweaks so that like 20, 50 years down the road they'll be able to get rich while everyone else is suffering. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
there's
mean, it's scary. It
yeah,
sounds scary to
and
me.
I think uh the silver lining is there are a lot of people like you, me, and Crystal who are awake to these realities, but the people who have the small group of people who have a large amount of power and control are not gonna go quietly, and they're gonna do a lot of things to manipulate the system.
Well, you're talking about the fox and the hen house, and to use for an example, when a doctor is billing, if a doctor gives a well visit, they get way less money than if they prescribe a procedure or if they prescribe a medication. So even the system itself is geared, it seems to me, against wellness. And the reason why I call it a sick care system, and I'm not the person that first coined that phrase. I heard it somewhere. I read it or I heard it. But the reason why I think it's so appropriate is because all we do is we deal with sick people and we give them medications. And for every medication, what people don't realize is there's a whole slew of side effects. Let's take weight loss, for instance. Right now, about 75% of adult Americans are overweight, with about 43% being obese, which means, if we don't take care of that, they're going to have a heart attack. Now, I know that, I mean, the diet industry is worth billions, but recently you've heard about and I've got to be careful because I sure don't want to be slammed with a lawsuit, but right now I can say this, Ozempic is under a class action lawsuit because of the side effect that the people are saying. So the way the drug works, these glucolipoproteins, is they take the food and it slows it down so that it stays in your stomach a long, long time. And so you feel full for hours and hours and you don't hardly eat anything. So you're kind of starving your body. You are. We know that the weight loss, and even they themselves say this, the drug manufacturers say that the minute you go off of it, there's a high probability you will gain the weight back and pretty rapidly. The other thing we've come to realize with these weight loss drugs, which are quote unquote miracle cures, is that about half of the weight that they lose is muscle mass. So if you then go off of it because you have to for the side effects, or you just decide, I don't want to pay this much money for the rest of my life, because that's what, if you sign on to that, you know you have to stay on it the rest of your life. I don't want to have to deal with this the rest of my life. So the problem is then you rapidly gain back the weight. But are you gaining back muscle mass? No, you're not gaining back muscle mass. You're gaining back pounds and often fat. And so you end up being heavier and your body mass index is in a worse position because you have more body fat to muscle composition. So your metabolism is slowed down even more. And these drugs are the drug company's biggest cash cow ever. Like Ozempic was about to become the biggest cash maker. This was a year ago of all time for Novo Nordics, who made it. And of course, these companies are promoting it because it's worth billions and billions of dollars. And people are using it because our mentality is we want something fast. And also, there is a really real risk of if we don't get in a healthy weight, if we don't remove the cholesterol, that you can have heart attacks and things like that. So I'm not judging anybody that decides to take that route. I don't believe in that. People have the freedom to make their choices. But the sad thing is they're maybe not always aware of their side effects. And this class action lawsuit is because some people had to go off of it because of stomach paralysis, GI paralysis, and even months after they went off the drugs, they still have the GI paralysis. That's what they're claiming. That's what the lawsuit is about. And they are saying that their health has been wrecked for the rest of their lives. So when you take a drug to treat a problem, then there's all these side effects. And then you have to take other drugs to deal with those side effects, which makes more side effects. And then you also have the issue of drug intolerance. We know that the more you take a drug, then your body after a while gets used to it. Your body metabolizes more and more, but you get to be able to, I mean, that's how alcohol tolerance builds. You get to where you can handle more and more. So that's a problem because then you have to get more and more and more. So you're taking more and more and more and more drugs. That was me with my asthma. And you're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So I guess I'm raising the flag and saying, can we deal with our health in a way that makes sense? Can we not grab the pill as the very first line of treatment? Can we start looking at the root causes, as Mark said, and stop hacking away at the symptoms and the leaves of the tree? And meanwhile, the tree is growing these deep roots, and we're not doing anything about it.
And even if we say we've come to the last fork in the road and we have to take that drug, then it would be nice if our healthcare provider took a long-term view instead of short-term view, like we're gonna give you this drug to fix this problem. instead it would be nice if when you walked in there, they said, okay, we've got to give you this. Now let's build a plan to get you off of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, that's where I come in. I
Yeah,
mean, not that I'm not going around getting people off their medication. Let me just make that up front. However, when people work with me, sometimes they are able to reduce and get off their medications. You know, if you are, for instance, 50 or 60 pounds overweight and you have high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes and you lose that weight, you can sometimes go off that medication. I have had people that could eventually get off medication because we removed the problem. We started at the root.
right. And as we said before, when you're at a point in your life where you understand and you see, I really love sociology and psychology of why we are where we are, and why humans do what they do. And so that right there was my very first like dive into, you know, because it was affecting me, you know, the food and people pushing drugs to solve that problem. And yeah, there was another conversation I wanted to have about that. Um, when you realize these things, and as you can imagine, over my 24 years of being disabled, I've been on over 40 medications, trying doctors practicing different and trying different things, and I was guinea pig, kind of thing, you know. And as you were saying, within that, okay, we're going to fix this or try to fix this, but it's going to have a bunch of other side effects. Well, those things eventually became where those many side effects that fix this one or two problems was not worth it.
Yeah.
And so eventually I got to a point where I was able to, as you mentioned, you have to be very disciplined and very, wanting to, very stubborn, as you said, to be able to do it. But when you understand that, coupled with that, you're able to say, okay, that's going to be really hard and it's going to be enough physically taxing at times and mentally taxing too. But I've got to try to wean myself off of these things and work with someone to help me do it. And
Yeah,
so at this time, I'm not taking anything.
Wow. So let
it's
me ask you this, if I may, Crystal. What about the rewards? What were the rewards of going off those medications and seizing your health?
So obviously, if you knew me before, I was very quiet, very brain fog, a lot of brain fog, and a lot of I couldn't focus,
Mm,
or I could, but it was really hard, and I would mask things.
mhm.
And so now I'm able to consciously have a conversation and stay on topic, and also have aphasia. So I
Mm.
don't, you know what that is? Where you lose words and you
You
can't,
forget things, yes.
they're in your head, but you can't verbalize what you
Can't pull
want.
them out.
So yeah, so that's a totally different thing of not knowing, brain fog, and then when that happens, that's different. So people get confused which, but also I wanted to say that it's so sad when companies, when they try to tell somebody, with a disability or even with anything, that what they have is and they know they caused what you have or have contributed to what you have, and in those foods or whatever, the side effects of the medication. But then say it's your fault when you can't go to work or you can't do this or you can't do that because you're too, you know, disabled now to be able to function, you know,
Yeah,
on that level. So,
that's really hard. And it's not your fault. And I guess the first thing is recognizing that where are all these things coming that create sickness and disease in my body. I think you just hit that on the head, recognizing that's different for everybody. Some people may need to stay on medication. Um, what are the decisions I'm making every day? Because what is a habit? It's just a decision that we made at one point that we keep doing over and over, right? It's a shortcut that our brain does to save time and work. But we can choose, we can make decisions. And I guess the thing that's so sad is that, like, when we're kids, I guess we're all there, and in our teens, we think that whatever we do, we can do whatever we do. We can eat all this junk food, and it has no effect on our bodies. But the sad thing is I meet with people that, and this is not a judgment call because I love the people that I work with.
yeah.
I love people. Hopefully that comes across. I really do. I want them to be well. But the sad thing is they fool themselves. They buy into the lies that the industry sometimes give them, and they think, well, I can eat this. It's not going to harm me. It's or then the other thing I hear is you've got to live. And the issue is, are some of these habits become addictions, and those are actually running our lives. And so instead of making sound decisions like you did, Crystal, saying, no, I don't want to feel this brain fog anymore. I don't want to have to deal with aphasia. And I'm on whatever 40, 20 different medications, and they're making me unable to function in my activities of daily living. I'm going to make a different choice. I'm going to make an informed choice. And I'm all about that. Make an informed choice and recognize that ultimately we are all responsible for our behavior. And yes, there's addictions that have caused us to not be blamed for being addicted, but we also can say, okay, that I'm addicted to this, or my body has become dependent on this medication. What can I do about it? And that's really what I do. I shine the light on it and I say, okay, wait a minute, let's just. I have people that come to me that say, I've been on every diet. They list them all. None of them work. Okay, well, let's shine the light on that. What happened? And really, what it is, sometimes they just didn't believe that they could make the changes to lose the weight. Sometimes it was an emotional trigger that was causing them to overeat. Like, it's different for everybody, but it is often because they have negative views or they feel powerless. And again, that goes back to what we started with. Uh, I think it was what I said, Dr. Manning, that said, if you want to change behavior, there's three areas. One is what you believe, what you're thinking, what your habits are, and what your environment is. So we have to set ourselves up in environments for success. We have to believe we can change, and then we have to form habits that will help us be as successful and as contributing and and as healthy and as happy as we can be. I'm all about that.
I think part of the obstacle is, you know, where, if you're talking about younger people like who have maybe have a sense of invincibility, or they're not necessarily in control of their environment as much, or they're they're still a little psychologically vulnerable in that way. And a lot of these bigger snack food companies or whatever specifically market to kids, and
Yeah,
that's their target because they know that if we can get them at that young, vulnerable age, we have them for life.
Oh, that's just, yeah, that's so true, Mark. And that reminds me of, I recently read a study that, well, there's two studies that I was reading about. One of them was that for the first time ever, our life expectancy is going down, not up. And then the other thing that was shocking to me is that we now have kids with type 2 diabetes, children with high blood pressure. These are preventable diseases. And and I'm not blaming the parents because it's a whole system, you know, and I think the system is geared against us. But yeah, I guess I'm just raising the flag and saying, hey, we can make a change, and let's start by just let's make one choice. You know, if even if all you just decide is all right from now on, I'm not buying it. And if it's in a box or something, I'm not going to do it. Let's just make one choice, one healthy choice. I'm all about, like, it's overwhelming when you're trying to help people change, um, to change your diet and your exercise and your sleep and your stress and start lowering some of your medication. It's too much. I tell people, find one thing that you want to start on and make it small. Do it so that it's not going to be totally overwhelming. And even if all you do, let's say that you eat out for lunch every single day, maybe you grab junk food. Maybe all you say is, okay, this week, instead of going out every day, I'm only going to go out 2 days this week. Just start making small steps, because small steps have huge benefits. 1 pound of weight loss removes 9 pounds of pressure from your joints and your muscles and your bones. So people think, well, 1 pound, what's a big deal? That's huge. And let's round it up, almost 10 pounds. You lose 10 pounds, that's almost 100 pounds of pressure you've removed. That's huge. Small changes over time make massive differences. So yeah, let's believe we can, and let's make small changes, and let's just do it.
Anything else, Chris?
Uh, no, so, and where can people reach you? How can they become involved with talking with you and getting the information you provide?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. You can follow me there or send me a message there. It is my name. I have a free wellness group called Anna's Healthy Habit Hacks 30 plus on Facebook. It's a private group. You do need the information, an invite. So if anybody sends me a message, I will give them an invite to come. I do training and teaching several times a week. That's totally and completely free. I have a website where they can look into, there's more information there, especially if they're interested in, becoming a client, if they need more support. Um, my website, I don't know, that might be harder to put up, but maybe you could link that. You could email me. My email is AMAC, that's AMC at healthgoalvictories.com. HEALTH, goal as in GOAL, victories, VICTORIES.com. And so that you can send me an email, and I will even give you my phone number. If you call me, I'm just going to tell you, Crystal found this out the other day. I don't answer my phone because I get 1,000 or so robocalls, but I always answer my texts. So leave me a text, or leave me a voicemail. But my phone number is on my website, and I will give it here. It's 225-241-8642. And I would love to help anybody that is needing some more information or wants to join my free wellness group, to, if they have some habits they're struggling with and they'd like to know just little bit by little bit what they can change. Love to invite them. So thank you for asking me, and thank you so much for letting me talk about something that I'm so passionate about, and sharing the message of we can be well.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Mark and I are, some of these topics, we love to dive into and try to understand it, but we don't have the capacity sometimes to understand it and be as knowledgeable as some of our guests are. So we'd love to have people like you on that can do that and share those resources with our audience.
Well, thank you. It's absolutely been a pleasure talking to you and talking with you, getting to know you a bit. And thank you for the great work you do in advocacy and promoting wellness among the disability community. And thank you for everybody for listening. I hope that we've shared something that might have been beneficial for someone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah.
All
Have a
right.
good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Also, we wanted to remind you to encourage, educate, and empower someone today. Bye.
Bye.